Hi, everybody. I'm here talking with an author, Brian Pigg, who's going to talk about his book, Dark Lady. And I'll turn it over to Brian to first give us an idea on what the book is about, or the main character, or what inspired him to write this particular idea. So, Brian?
Hello, and thank you for having me on your webcast. I wrote this book. This is Dark Lady. This is my not-for-retail proof copy. It's about a killer and a woman that tries to write her story, but ends up in a web of lies and deceit.
But it turns out that the killer is actually like serving some kind of supernatural power, right?
Right. She's part of a cult or secret society that's serving a goddess that hasn't existed for a long time, or doesn't apparently exist for a long time. It's the start. It's kind of a mystery thriller type of book, and it leads to an investigation toward more mysticism, fantasy in a current, what's the word for it? In our time, set in our time, like a fantasy novel set in our time.
Okay, an urban fantasy in a way.
Sure.
I think what I thought was really interesting was that the supernatural power here, the goddess, is kind of, I think, more true to what a lot of gods were than a lot of people in our time want to believe. But they, we like to think of gods as being kind of, they might be silly sometimes. These ancient gods are kind of, they might do some things, but basically they were like good guys, and I don't think they were really good guys a lot of the time. People looked around and saw tornadoes or hurricanes or whatever, and they were afraid of these supernatural beings, and these were beings that could come and wipe you out if they really felt like it. So they weren't necessarily nice. You maybe been trying to make them give you something that you wanted, but at the same time realizing they were powerful enough to, do something bad to you. So they're much more ambivalent kind of characters. And I think the goddess that this character is in a cult of seems more like that.
Right, and I like that sort of supernatural power, because in my opinion they would have a much longer view of time and space, right? So we have this little short view, 70, 80 years, 90 years, whatever. But you're talking about something that's lived for 1 billion years, maybe. Your life would be pretty insignificant to them in the long haul. So they have this huge long plan, and you're just this wee part of it. And so, you don't know, but everybody's trying to use that power to get something for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the crux of the matter, is this cult is actually using this goddess's power to essentially be the spider behind the throne that runs everything in the world.
Okay.
I'm kind of lifting the sheets off some of the books that are coming later, but the main character, Kelly, does not know any of this, so you have to learn this as you go. She's an aspiring wannabe reporter with a lot of issues to get over. And I wrote this because in my pout phase, after writing and rewriting Metamorphosis a dozen times, I took a quick writing class, and they said, write the worst character you could think of, the worst person as a character you could think of. And so for me, I thought, a beautiful woman who's got access to money. Everybody loves her. She's the society, the crux of society, the linchpin of society, and everybody thinks she's great, but she just happens to like killing people. I thought that would be a pretty horrible main character. But as I started to write about her, I realized I couldn't write it from her point of view because she knows what's going on.
Right.
So then it becomes very much like the whole interview sort of thing, where you have to learn about her from the outside, so that you don't just learn everything once you get inside of her head.
Right. So this isn't the first novel that you wrote. So you've written other novels before. Can you tell us a little bit about your process of writing the novel? Or some people are more outline driven. Some people are just more seat of the pants driven. Some people use a combination. How do you try to work it?
Honestly, I'm purely seat of the pants. And I would say if you look at who actually makes money writing, outlining would probably be the best way to go. But I wrote like 40,000 words of this on a whim, and then sat down and said, hey, maybe I can make something out of it. And I expanded it. And then in the 14 times you rewrite it after the first time you actually write it, it expanded out to around 77 or 80,000 words. But yeah, it's like my outline is actually that first 40,000 word puke into the computer.
Okay.
I know it's crap. I mean, it's just crap. But it's got the outline of what I want, and then I go back and mold each section of it to meet my end goal.
Okay. Yeah, I do think some people who, I've heard different ideas. Some people think that if you outline more, it helps you stay focused, but other people are like, but if I know what's going to happen, I get bored too fast. So I don't know if you feel either like you get bored of the characters when you knew what they were going to do, or you just kind of have an idea what they're going to do, and then kind of just sort of organically find that ending or do you know how it's going to end?
Generally, I don't know how things are going to end. I have another book that I'm writing about, a science fiction book, and I wrote it all the way to the end, and I didn't like how it ended. I mean, my guy's sitting on an asteroid alone, watching his oxygen run out. I was like, well, that's not a very fun ending to a book. So, but now to get back, you have to unpeel all those things that you closed and try and figure out how you ended up here and change it. It's a hard process to do, but that's why I've questioned whether I should outline or not, because if I know what's going to happen, maybe I wouldn't end up in that type of situation. But a lot of times I start out with moments of the story in my head, and I'm really just writing a connectors in that first 40,000 blurb. I'm just writing the connectors between what I know happens, and then I find the ending. Mm-hmm. But now I have to go back and fix everything, because I think one of the first times you looked at one of my books before it was published, it was like, it's kind of like a travel book, and that's not, of course, the point. But that's how I got there, right? I went, and then we ride here, and then we do this, and then we ride here, and then we do that, right? And you have to go back and fix all of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an important point to make, the fixing, because I have met a lot of aspiring authors who they write something down, it doesn't really work because they haven't really learned how to rewrite, and then right. You say, well, but you need to go through it. It needs to have more, description or work on your dialogue. Then they kind of get upset, and they're like, but this is the way I want it to be. And it's like, that's great, that's unreadable. You have to be able to step back from your own work and say, okay, I'm churning this up. I'm, as you said, unpeeling it, I'm fixing it. And personally, that's my least favorite part of writing. I like to do the research. I like to write the first draft. But after the first draft's done, I kind of wish I was done. But then I have to go back, as you said, and fix things. So when you're doing the process, what do you like and not like about it?
The first part where I'm just writing it, I'm just typing out this new thing, and I don't really know where it's going to go. That's very exciting. Mm-hmm. But with 7 or 8 of them in the computer that aren't published yet, I've become less enamored with that phase. Mm-hmm. And I like because what I really like is I like character development. I like to mold characters that I like, and I like to try things that are unusual. And so the fixing part has become quite fun for me. Mm. But I still get the poutiness. So when you find out that so the first person who reads it says, well, this person is too whiny, or this is too much like a Dungeons and Dragons episode or something. I get a little pouty about that. It's not saying anybody's wrong because they feel that way. That is true. That's the way they feel. But now it's like I exposed my thought to you, and it was insufficient. So that's my least favorite part, to find out how I'm insufficient. But then, eventually get over that, and you go back and you start taking a hammer and nails and fixing this up.
Yeah, taking critique can be pretty tough. The first 3 novels I wrote, the writers group I'm in, they all said the same thing. Like, the first 100 pages of this is really boring. And I'm like, oh, crap, man. I've never learned how to write a beginning of a book, because every time I put one through the group, they're like, well, the first 100 pages, man, cut them and they're dull. And it's like, and so the 4th one was Sky Knight. And then I'm like, you know what? If we're going to start off by cutting out somebody's heart, and it's not going to be boring, but you have to get through like those first few books where you're making all those mistakes, and people are pointing them out, like, this is boring, this doesn't work, you need to do this better or whatever. And just like, oh man, this is a lot more work than I even anticipated, and I knew it was going to be a lot of work.
Right.
But, it is a lot of work. So
well, in the for me, I think I can write, like, the first thought I have is a good thought, and so I write this book and it's a good thought, and it works. The first books of all of my series everybody seems to like, and then my trouble is I can't seem to make a compelling second book to go along with the first book, to follow the first book, and I'm not sure what that's about, but it's been very difficult to create the second book in the series.
I think there's one of the things that's difficult about a series is when you're writing a standalone novel, you only have to worry about this one big story arc, right? You got a problem, you got a character tries to fix the problem or whatever they're going to do, and you resolve said problem or not, however you plan to approach it, and you have some kind of resolution and it's over. With a series, you need to have that arc in every book so that each book isn't just like, oh, this is really like chapters 3 to 6 of a much longer work, but it's actually a story in itself, but it also has to be part of a longer story arc. And so it's like, it's got its own, and it has to be part of a longer thing, and that can be difficult to juggle without sacrificing one or the other.
Yeah, and it's hard to keep it subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to play your hand up front and then just bleed out another 200,000 words. It's first, like you said, you have to have a compelling second story, but you also have to keep working in this thing without revealing what you're doing, because you don't want to pull the curtain back and everybody's like, well, that's exactly what I thought was going to happen, right? Nobody wants to read that book. And you're like, wow, I want my money back.
Yeah, if you can't show all your cards at once, right? You can have more cards, and they have to come out over more books. Right. And at the same time, each book has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So
it would be nice to, and it's hard too when you don't, I mean, you have a good writers group, and I have yet to find a good writers group. The groups I've been trying to be part of, they only want to read a chapter or something at a time. People don't always come, so now they haven't read the last 2 chapters or something. And your feedback is now somewhat useless to me. You know what I mean? And if you're just going to read 1 chapter of 58 chapters, what's the point? How helpful is that?
Yeah, that's one thing in our writers group. We only look at complete novels. Except sometimes you make an exception. We'll maybe look at the first 3 chapters, because sometimes you would submit the first 3 chapters to a publisher, or to your agent to submit to the publisher. So it's like, okay, are these compelling enough that you think the agent or publisher is going to say, yes, send me the rest of the book? And if you think it's that interesting, then yeah, maybe I'll go ahead and write the rest of the book, or I'll fix the things here that people notice, and then I'll make those mistakes later, whatever. But generally, we look at an entire novel. because it's really hard to give feedback when you don't know how it gets tied up, or how this character is going to come out with their character arc or anything. You're just like, well, this chapter seemed kind of lame or whatever, or it was really great, but how it fits into the larger book, who knows? So that's difficult. Finding people who are dedicated enough is difficult. When we started I wasn't in the beginning, but in our group, when we were really beginners, it was like, these meetings are like business meetings. You have to come. If your grandma dies or something, that's something. But we once had someone not come because she wanted to go to take her sister and go to some garage sales, and they're like, then you're not that serious. You're going to go to a garage sale over a business meeting. We don't need you. So you've got to find people who have that kind of level of dedication, which can be really difficult, because writing is hard, and then carving out the time to write is hard. Carving out time to go critique remember the other people in the groups, their work's hard. Then you got to meet and take critique and give critique, and it's all difficult. So are you going to be the kind of person that really can get in there and just say, okay, this is what I'm going to do? And that's hard. Yeah. It's all hard. And a lot of people, and everybody thinks they can do it. I can tell you how many people have come up to me at conventions, and they're like, I had this great idea, and sometime when I have time, I'm just going to sit down and write it out. And it's like, okay, I don't hear you say anything about you're going to learn how to write dialogue or work on character development or pacing or anything. You just assume that now you have the idea that some afternoon you'll sit down and this will just come out finished. I guess good luck, but that's not really how it happens.
And honestly, even though I know you, and some of the process you've been through, when I finished my first book, I thought I was done. I really did think I was done. So there was a long pout, which led to this book and others. But you really, when you think you're done, and you have to have somebody else look at it and tell you, no, you're not done, because in your own head, it's perfect, right? You're filling in all those blanks because it's just your thought on paper, essentially. And your brain fills it in. So somebody else has to read it and tell you what you're missing. And it gets difficult.
Yeah. We originally had a rule in our writers group where if your book was being critiqued, we didn't have the meeting at your house. So that if you wanted to run away and cry, you weren't stuck there with hosting everyone else, you could leave. Now that we've all been critiquing each other for almost 30 years, that rule's gone. We don't, we've kind of gotten over a lot of that. We still pout, but you pout in private, and it's not nearly as bad, because you're
right.
Man, I thought it was, that I'd done that better, and then everyone says, oh no, this chapter really stinks, and for this reason. That's a good group can tell you, because this is what's wrong, and here's maybe a way you might fix it.
Well, and you trust those people.
Want to take it, but
you trust those people, and they're not going to tell you things that aren't true, because you know them, and you have that level of respect and trust about what it is. So they say, hey, this chapter is completely unnecessary, and it was your favorite chapter. You're going to take that. Whereas if you go to Panero some afternoon and talk to 4 people, and 2 of them you just met, one of them's like, oh, I didn't like that chapter. And you're just like, okay, well, thanks.
Yeah, having that people is good. It's just, I know there are a lot of writers groups that I've heard of that do things like that, and I just, I don't know if they're successful, how many writers they can get published, as if they're getting published. But you know what I mean? That you have that dedication, right. People helping you and lift you up. And we call people sharks who don't do that. We don't let sharks in our meetings. So it's like, if I see something wrong, I'll say, hey, I don't think this works because this character in the last scene, they did this, and now they're doing this, and I don't see where they made that leap of knowledge or, whatever. And a shark is someone's like, you're crap, and, right. They're not critiquing the book, they're critiquing you. And but you don't need that, and you need to be able to pick those people out.
Yeah, and I haven't really run into a lot of that, but most of the people that I've run into are, they're working on their first novel or something, maybe their second. And it's like, I just need you to finish something. You know what I mean? I need, we tell you something, or there are several books that I've been part of this group that I like their book, but I'm never going to know how it ends. You know what I mean? It's like this isn't ending.
Yeah. In fact, in our group originally we had a rule that you had to finish 3 short stories to submit to for the group to consider you as a member. And that was basically not because you had to write a good story, but did you actually finish something? Did you or you wrote the first 2 pages and then quit? Then that's not the same as, okay, I may have a story that doesn't really work, and maybe I don't know how to write dialogue, but it does have a beginning, middle, and end, and here I finished it. So I mean, that's a different level of dedication to actually get to the project and stop and have it ended.
I think short stories are hard. I don't know that I can write a short story because I like time to mold characters over, and you just can't do that if you're doing like 17,000 words or something. Where are you going to get 20,000 words? Where are you going to get this character built up? My problem is writing too much, really. I'll put too much in there because I have too many ideas I want to play with for each character, and you end up having to cut 50,000 words or something out just to have a decent sized story.
Yeah.
But like Dark Lady just sort of worked out that way. It just worked out to the right size, 70 or 80,000, between 70 and 80,000 words. I don't remember what it exactly ended up as, but that's a decent novel-sized length.
Mm-hmm.
Metamorphosis was different. I mean, it ended up like 150,000 words, and you had to cut 50,000 words. And of course, the critique is always, you need more description, or you need more. This needs a better explanation or something. So I need to cut 50,000, but I also need to add 10 or 15,000 to, fill out. So I'm really cutting 60,000. It's those are difficult processes, and you really need help to do them.
Yeah, and that's a practical issue too when you're publishing, say, on Amazon. For those who don't know and haven't published on Amazon, once you upload your novel, Amazon's logarithm or whatever figures out how much paper it's going to take basically to publish this, and will tell you the minimum price you can put on this book is, and then give you a number. And then if that number suits you, you can put that down as the price of the book. If you want to make a few more cents, then you would price the book a little bit higher. But if you see a book on Amazon that says, this is $13.99, you think, well, that seems awfully expensive. Well, a lot of that's going to be Amazon's price too.
Right.
So, for instance, somebody in my group has a really great book, but it's like 150 or 75,000 words, and she's like, if I put this up on Amazon, it'll just be too expensive. No one will buy it because it'll end up being like $18 or $19 at that length. So that is a consideration if you're thinking about publishing your book through Amazon, at least.
Which is
that you might want to take into account. It's one of those like non-writing things you have to think about then. Besides, like, where would I get the cover, and how will I do the layout, whatever. It's like, how long is this, and how much is Amazon going to charge people?
Right.
So there's all kinds of things, from the original idea to writing it to revising it to then getting it in people's hands, and none of it's really easy. So,
yeah, and of course, you can't expect. You can dream about being the person that writes the next $1 million book. I mean, that's a dream. I think everybody who writes a book wants that to be their dream, right? But be realistic and just say that you have to write it for you. If it makes money, it makes money. That's my philosophy on it, anyway.
Yeah.
I just can't worry about that.
Yeah, that is an issue. If you really think, and I have had people come up and tell me, the same people who are like, someday when I have the time, I'll sit down and write it. We'll then follow that up with a sentence like, and it will, be a blockbuster or whatever. Or they're going to turn it into a movie. It's so great. And like, in fact, when the people say that, they usually say the idea they're keeping it a secret because they don't want anybody to steal their idea. It's like, everybody's had the same ideas, dude. That you're not special. How you put it down on the paper will be special if you actually learn how to do that. But just the idea itself, you know, it's probably zombies or vampires or, you know, something like that. And great, but we've seen it a lot. What are you going to do to make it yours? You'll find that out when you write it, I guess. But people do plan on, this is my one idea, and that someday when I have the time, I'll write it down, and it will make me millions of dollars. And it just doesn't work like that.
No. I think I don't remember there's like a Japanese book, 15th or 16th century, and like every adventure book is essentially a repeat of this book. I mean, Star Wars, the first Star Wars, what I consider the first Star Wars, the 1977 one, is just like a repeat of this book. I wish I could remember the name of it right now, but no idea is original because, you know, that's 400 years ago. They wrote this adventure story, and it was exactly this model that almost every adventure story, you know, hero comes to the thing and gets the deal, and then he's got the magic weapon, and then he takes down the empire kind of story. Mm-hmm. It's been around for 400 years.
Right, and certainly Joseph Campbell outlined the hero's journey too, and George Lucas specifically mapped that Star Wars movie to the hero's journey, because that's the kind of story, I guess, that people seem to like to read or listen to, and because that's what we keep going back to over and over. I mean, even if you go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have a lot of these same things happening. So yeah, your idea has been around since Gilgamesh, if not before. We just didn't know you weren't writing it down before.
Right.
So, you know, your idea, great, you have an idea, but execution is going to be key.
Yeah. And I'm not going to write, you know, romance novels. I guess right now, if you want to make money, you write these romance series. They're like 5,000 or 6,000 words or something, and people are paying $2 for each one, and you can pump out 100 of them, you know.
Huh? I had not heard.
And it interests me not at all. So I'll make my money some other way and just write what I want to write.
Yeah. Well, you have to write. You don't want to get bored, or you don't want to be writing something like, I hate this. I really wish I'd be writing something I really wanted to write. Although I guess then you end up being Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and you toss Sherlock Holmes off the rank and about falls, and because you're tired of writing him, and everyone's upset with you, and so you have to bring him back. But most people aren't in that little squeeze.
Yeah, that would be a rough place to be.
Yeah.
So popular, I'll have to bring back my dead characters. Rough.
Yeah. Well,
bad.
Give yourself something to play with. I think that's the advice of some of my writers group. Is like, you know, I didn't just put in this particular trope. I put in like other things. So I have things. It's if the world is bigger, and so if I'm writing the third or fourth novel, and I think we've kind of explored one aspect of the world, well, there's more that's been set up. You know, maybe in the previous books, it just gets a mention, or a character drives by something or whatever, but then you get to pay attention to that later and expand on your world there. So how many books are you planning in this series for the Dark Lady?
That's a rough question. I took the second book that I originally wrote as the second book is set off to the side now, and I have a whole new second book that has this character is the main character of that book. So Kelly advances on to the next stage, and I wrote that second book so that I could also publish the other one if I want to. They would mesh, but the total Kelly series would be 3 books. Now, whether there's side books that cover what's happening outside of her sphere, whether those ever get published or not, but they exist. There's 2 more of those.
Okay, so that's a good point, though. You have somewhat this Kelly character, but you can have others because the world is big enough. And then
Right.
there are other section of this cult, or the goddess who wants to do things in other areas or something. I would think you could even set things back in time at some other point with the goddess if you just felt like writing the book
Right.
at, you know, Greenland in 1000 AD or whatever.
Well, and you think of, you're going to be bringing this goddess back, right, from wherever she is. This whole, not to reveal too much, too many spoiler alerts, but in my mind, to do that, that's not going to be something you just walk into a room and say, hello, I'm, wave your little magic doohickey and poof. Because, a goddess could do that for herself. So you need like a complex ritual. It's going to need pieces and parts that are hidden in different places and stuff. And if you've got one character in a limited amount of time, how are you going to hit all of these things? But if you had a goddess, I would think would also be smart enough to say, well, I need 2 people to do this and 1 person to do that. And I can have these different timeline sort of things running where they're doing different things, but it's all going to come back at a point. Mm-hmm. And that point is where my plan comes together. And so it attracts me to have these other group of people doing part of the work, the lifting. And then in the end, they come together and this thing appears.
Yeah. Yeah. You want even a deity type character, want them to be smart, but they can't really be all powerful, right? Because all powerful deity shows up and just fixes things. So there's no plot. You need them to be hobbled somehow and not be an infinite kind of character.
Well, and I absolutely detest Superman. I'm sorry if that angers anyone, but a character that can do anything, survive anything, and you have to actually create some sort of mystery object to limit them somehow. That's one of the reasons, like in the second Metamorphosis book, I'm determined to kill the main character from the first book because she's become sort of the Superman character. And, well, then she just thinks about it and solves the problem. Well, poof, there's no need to write these books anymore. She's just going to fix everything. So, oops, she dies. And
she could get re-hobbled by something else.
Right. Well, she's going to get hobbled by death, but it has a purpose. It's not just like I'm going to whack her because I'm going to whack her, but it's going to be the catalyst for something. But that way, my group of characters in that book, it's a group of characters, they have to stumble on without the Superman that solved things for them in the first book. Now they have a new challenge, and that challenge is to continue to solve these problems without that character.
And that's a problem for a lot of people, I think. I don't remember the series, but it's one of the detective series that's out. So not a fantasy or science fiction or horror, is what I'm saying. Just one of those standard police procedurals or whatever. But someone who reads those had told me that by book 6 or 7, the main character is pretty much invincible. They know everything. I guess they have like enough contacts in the underworld that they can do anything, and it's just like it's so easy for them to solve everything.
Right.
Because they now are so powerful, at least in terms of information and control of, or at least contacts with criminals and stuff, and people owe them favors. And for the few phone calls, basically they can kind of tidy everything up. So you have to watch out for that in all kinds of genres.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, any final words you want to have about Dark Lady? We will put the link to the Amazon page in the description.
Cool. I hope you like it. Thanks for reading it.
All right, I think it's a really good book.
I hope there's some things in there that surprise you.
Okay. Well, if you want to tell us what you thought of it, you can put that in the comments or not. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.